Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Dose, your daily dose of support. And today, as we think about taking excellent care of ourselves, as we know we're becoming more fatigued by this notion of social distancing and wanting to interact and engage with friends, how is it that we continue to take excellent care of ourselves? And so I'm so excited about today's guest as we talk about creating space and creating a space just for ourselves and in the spaces where we are and that we have, but creating them intentionally in a way that they're sacred spaces. So today's guest is Clover, and Clover is just such a phenomenal human being. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to tell you just a little bit about Clover. Now, Clover is currently serving as an AmeriCorps Vista in the St. Louis region. In addition to being a Vista currently, she's a social worker by training, and she's also in her spare time. I don't know how you do it. She's also a doctoral candidate. And so she's always got many things going on. And so I'm so incredibly excited to be tapping into the wisdom you're going to share with us today as I'm going to be taking notes to intentionally create space for myself. So Clover, thank you for joining us. But can you start off by talking about the importance of why we need to create space for ourselves intentionally?
Hi, Sean. I certainly can. I'm really excited about being able to talk about this because we all kind of got dumped at one time in our
Mhm.
homes. And so I do a lot of work at home. So I already had a space carved out. I knew what to do. I knew how to do it for myself. But I think about Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz and how just all of a sudden we got picked up in this coronavirus cyclone and kind of dumped into our houses all together. And then we had to kind of make sense of that. And for so many people, it feels like it's really traumatic. I know that we've made a lot of jokes about it, about being able to order food or, how we're working or what's going on. But really, we didn't have time to prepare to make these dedicated spaces for work. And when I say work, I don't necessarily just mean the 9 to 5 work that many people do, but also creating those sacred spaces for our young coworkers or the people who are who are in the homes with us. Maybe we have housemates with us, maybe we have spouses with us. Just being able to intentionally honor the spaces that we are providing for ourselves compassionately, as well as what we're doing with those workspaces for others.
Wonderful. And so, can you share a little bit about how we start to begin, even in maybe what's is starting to feel kind of claustrophobic right now in our home spaces, how we create kind of this sacred space for us, whether it's to work, whether it's to disconnect from work, which in my case, I'm seeing my computer on my kitchen table now 24/7. But how do we create those sacred spaces for us to have that workspace or and then have that personal space, or for our young coworkers have that school space, but maybe also have that just getting to be a kid space?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I can share my screen. Is that something I can do?
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna go ahead and try it. I've never worked with this platform, but let's see what happens and if I'm able to. Are you able to see my screen?
Not quite yet.
Okay, and you might not be able to. Let's see. It might not be something. Well, while I'm trying to figure that out, let me just tell you that some of the things you want to think about incorporating is making sure that your space is dedicated and energetic, safe, and also shareable. So, like or if you can see it, can you see my screen?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so making sure that those spaces, and you're probably seeing like a weird split screen, so I'll give you a little bit more here, are dedicated and energetic and safe as well as shareable. So, shareable might seem like an odd thing to talk about in terms of sacred or dedicated workspace, but as we've all been kind of lumped in our spaces together, we do want to make sure that we are dedicating the energy to our own workspace, but also making sure that we're not closing people out. So we've had to social distance ourselves here, but we want to make sure that we're not doing like too much social distancing within our homes as we are creating that kind of workspace. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And I'm just going to kind of continue and just interrupt me as you need to. So, like in thinking about preparing the space, one of the things that you want to think about is like, what does that space look like? So, here's one of the spaces that I carved out when I first came here. You want to reduce or remove any environmental stressors, any bills, clutter, for people who might still be using newspapers that's talking about the coronavirus. We don't need to have that in our space all day, all the time. Any excessive devices that might hijack our brain. So a lot of us not only work with our laptops, but we might work with a tablet and a laptop and a cell phone and maybe two computers. But when you are in your home and you're trying to create the sacred space, the space where you're trying to draw as much energy for productivity as you are calm, you want to make sure that you're kind of like leaving some of that, some of those distractions out of the way. And the other thing that you might want to do is just kind of set intentions before you arrive in your workspace. So we think about the goals that we have. We may even wake up and think, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that. But intentions are more keeping you in the present. The goals are future oriented, where we want to remain stabilized. We want to remain grounded. It's been a hard time for everyone in the world. And if we can think about how we are going to accomplish our goals, but also to remain in the present, it's a good thing to do in just even before we get to our workspace. And to bring to that space an attitude of acceptance. So if you're in your office or in your classroom, you know there's a certain amount of things that you're going to get done. Life is going to be different when you're working remotely. It's going to be different when you're working remotely all of a sudden with your entire family under the pain of possible infection from the COVID virus. So cut yourself a break. Just think, even before you get to the workspace, that you're going to be compassionate with yourself. So now, in thinking about the locations, choose a location that is open, that's shareable, but with built-in boundaries. So you think about how coffee shops are used, and you go into a coffee shop, there can be 20, 30 other people, but you sit at your little table and it's yours, right? That little space, even if it's only the size of your laptop, it's kind of your dedicated space. So think about choosing a location that is kind of open, but has preset boundaries. Think about having a space that is friendly to your young coworkers. So I love feng shui, and feng shui talks about the command position. And that position is where you're kind of like grounded by a wall behind you where you can see everything in front of you. You might remember the British journalist from the BBC, where all of his kids kind of came in one by one. If you're in a command position, it kind of lets you see what's happening. And that's important right now because we're a little bit edgy, we're a little bit jumpy, and any surprises may just like disrupt us a little bit. So just being able to be where you are be able to focus on things. And then safety, just where you can, moderate adverse stimuli. So again, we talked about newspapers or just looking at your laptop or devices for news all the time. But maybe in the past you like to listen to NPR at work. Maybe that's not what you listen to. Maybe you choose to have soft music or background or something. So I'm going to take a break and see if you have any questions.
No, I think this is all so crucial, especially as we think about that intentionality. And also, I love that kind of visual of the coffee shop because, that coffee shop space is small, but yet somehow I manage to be productive, right? So recognizing that space I create doesn't have to be massive, right? I'm not in a big home, and so there's not a huge kind of office environment I can build. But recognizing in that small space I can be super productive. I just have to be very intentional about that. And I think for me, you the light bulb went off when you said I need to moderate that adverse stimuli because I know that my phone is constantly next to me where I get those CNN updates and maybe I need to turn those CNN updates off so A, I'm not as distracted, but then B, recognizing that emotional toll each of those updates are taking on me because it's never like, oh, there's such great joy in the world. It's always like new case numbers and the impact on the stock market. And so it's never something positive that pops up and recognizing maybe I need to eliminate those stimuli that aren't going to foster that safety for me.
And that stimuli, while it's important for what it's doing in our own gut biology or in our just for us, it's also important because if we have young coworkers with us, they react to our reactions. So as we see the numbers go up and up and we're aghast, they react to that also. They can see that. So when we are providing that sacred workspace, and so again, this isn't necessarily the conversation I would have about someone who had months to plan their at-home work environment.
Mm.
This is, like a crisis workspace that we all were dropped into. And thinking about how you're providing the sanctity of calm in your home for everyone that's in your
Mm.
environment.
So, can I ask, as we think about our young coworkers, what what adverse stimuli might we want to consider that they could be experiencing when we're thinking about intentionally creating a sacred space for them to read or do their schoolwork or play?
Yeah, so I mentioned it in general. Sorry, I may have just lost everything here. I mention it in general when I look at the creating the spaces. And so, in addition to the adverse, I'm also going to talk about what you can consider. So,
Okay.
um, so you can consider the five senses. We intuit or we experience the stimuli through what we're looking at, through what we're hearing, through what we're smelling, different things like that. And so by incorporating some of these things to consider the physical environment, what are they looking at all day? Is it something that's disrupting? Is it something that is um, lots of clutter? Is it something that where they are considering, oh, there's lots of food on the table and I'm always thinking about food or not enough food because of that may be what they're hearing. Also, looking at what you can include in terms of what's touching you or what's not touching you. So, just in terms of taking some of my cues from being trauma informed and creating safe and sacred workspaces, I like to think about temperature, material, things that are around you. So things like that. I'm not sure if you're with me, but I
I'm
keep talking.
I'm right here with you. No, I think that's important. And how different does it feel like, especially for our young coworkers, when they can claim something as their own space? Um,
Mhm.
and it's just theirs, and that sense of ownership, and then the sense of safety that may come along with it. I think that's really crucial to consider for our learners who, their lives have also been disrupted, right? That we just learned
Mhm.
they won't be going back to school and being physically in that classroom for the rest of this academic school year. So having that own space can feel really empowering.
It really is true, and helping them to create their own space. And so when we talk about space, everyone's not going to have the luxury of having an entire room or
Mhm.
maybe not even an entire table. So thinking again about that coffee shop space, if you are working with your young coworkers, allowing them to have more choice and autonomy and allowing them to be able to kind of choose where they're going to sit in the space, but not just where they're going to sit, but how they can carve that space out and make it their own, how they are able to choose some of the things that's going to go into their space. But again, making sure that where they are is not a cluttered space, that it's an open space, and that it is environmentally friendly.
So recognizing that what I may need in a space is not what my young coworker needs in their space. So giving
Absolutely.
that choice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm going to pick back up. There are a couple of things that I just wanted to make sure that I hit on. And one of those is using your brain. So, like, one of the reasons that we do want to create this kind of sacred and dedicated space is because of how our brain works. So, when we go into spaces, what we're doing is signaling to our brain that it's time to work. When we have a dedicated space that we've set apart, what we're saying to our brain and to other people, actually, that it's time to work. And so you can use, if you just have one space, you may not again have the luxury of saying, oh man, let me go into this other room. You can use a tablecloth even to kind of separate your space to say, oh, it's time to put the tablecloth on the table. It's dinner time. Or it's time, this is my workspace. And so it's work time. You can also use a basket to just kind of say, here, I'm going to kind of shift that away. And your young coworkers can also do the same thing. The importance of this is that it is going to help people to know when you are actively working and when you are available. And that's talking about some more of that shareable space. So one of the things you can do when you're working at home for yourself to carve out the sacred space is set up mindful traffic signals, anticipate and redirect interruptions. So you can expect that if you have a 3-year-old, that you're going to have interruptions. But what you can also do is begin to help that 3-year-old manage their own time and create and your sacred space, the sacred hour. So, I like to use like little cues like this, where maybe if it's a certain color, if it's green, it's like, okay, I'm available. You can talk to me anytime. But if it's red, and I put this on the back of my computer, the top of my computer lamp, it's like, I'm in my sacred hour. And unless you're on fire, you need to give me this sacred hour. But you also need to be mindful and understand how this is going for your coworkers. And you want to schedule in lots of breaks. And so in that way, you're kind of anticipating what's happening and you're allowing for the sharing to happen, but you're also understanding that they have their sacred space to work and hopefully they're going to do the same thing, but you're going to take lots of breaks together. You're going to need more breaks when you're in this situation that we are in with COVID right now. than you might need when you are at your regular work, or if you regularly work at home anyway. So you also want to model the integrity of your workspace. So if it's time to work, then you can work. But if your young coworkers see you at your computer playing solitaire, they're going to think, is she really working? Just like be able to define for yourself and for others when you are available for work and how is that being dedicated, not just for yourself, but for them also. So, some more tips from Feng Shui, just thinking about the sacred workspace, air and light and balance, bringing in nature, things that energize us, things that help us to reflect on the outside, even when we can't get outside. We've talked about location, the location of where you're going to have your space, and even like the positions, or maybe being able to be where you can see and where people can see you, and also the use of color. I use orange because it's energetic and I really like it. Blue is more calming though for people at this time. And if you haven't prepared that already, maybe you can use color in a way, just bringing in maybe a favorite picture that you have that you can put on the wall next to you, just something that's going to help you ground yourself. And so I'm, I tend to think of this as Camp COVID, right? If you are normally someone who is at home where you maybe didn't migrate from a 9 to 5 or whatever, but you were always at home, you need to be able to create sacred spaces for yourself in that way also. So making sure that all of a sudden there is not one person who has become the person who does everything, but just making sure that everyone is pitching in to create sanctity and sacredness in the home as everyone is working. When I started thinking about work, I was thinking of traditional work, but I wanted to expand it to the school work that people do. For children, it is their job to play, but it's also their job to do work also. So creating spaces, like you said earlier, that belong just to that child, even if that's a TV table with a shoebox. And again, allowing them to have the input on decisions that are impacting them. And allow them a sacred hour where even they would not be interrupted. Just being able to model for them, look at the things that we're doing for ourselves and seeing how it's appropriate for them also. So our school age worker, maybe the older worker, maybe the teenagers or so, where it's been really difficult for them, they're dealing with a lot of traumas in terms of what they're going to be able to finish or complete at school. So allow them to design a space for themselves. And also, I like to think of maybe lending them something from our own lives that stabilized us, that helps them to keep calm. Maybe something like a diploma or something that we've completed, because what that tells us, and it tells them, as you will get through hard times, you will be able to finish something. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm going to stop again and let you ask questions.
No, I'm just really kind of soaking this up and thinking about my space that I've created here, because it seems like even when I know I've done as much as I'm going to productively get done today for work, because I see my computer and all my work stuff right there on that kitchen table, kind of central in my home, there's this constant anxiety that I should be working. So I guess my question for me is, as I think about creating space intentionally in a smaller apartment, would you recommend that maybe I need to pack up and tidy up that work area to signify to my brain, work time is done, I've left the office, right?
There definitely needs to be a delineation between the time that we're working at home and, the time that we're doing work and our life. Our lives cannot, already we don't know what day it is. So our lives cannot be this endless stretch of blob where it's work, it's relaxation. There needs to be delineations for our brains to understand and give us the optimum time. So our brains kick in and are like, yes, it's time to work. I want to say one more thing because I'm looking at our time and I really want to, in sacredness, the outside world is knocking on our door. Even though we are inside, it is kicking in. And video conferencings and meetings and things bring in a work stress into our homes that we haven't necessarily prepared for. For our children, if you know you're going to have a rough meeting, put on headphones so that they don't have to hear your boss or coworkers maybe disagreeing loudly with you all the So, in addition to all the other traumas in their lives, our young coworkers don't necessarily need to hear what would necessarily happen in our works. And digital does keep us connected. It's sometimes the only way we have connections to the outside world. But we need to be grounded offline also. So keeping your work life refreshed means to disconnect, as hard as that might be. Also means good self-care and sleep and healthy eating and healthy relationships and good movement. That's all part of the sacred work. That's all part of keeping your work sacred. So I just wanted to get those in, and I've stopped sharing.
No, and I really love how you use this language of young coworkers because we need to recognize that our children, whether it's their schoolwork or their playing, that is their work. And we want to give that validity that that's their job right now, and that working is just as crucial for them as it is for us in this time, whether it's playing, whether it's reading, whether it's using your imagination or doing your schoolwork, but giving that validation to our children that they are working. And so using this mind frame of everyone's a coworker in the home and that we treat their work with respect like we would our colleagues in the office.
Absolutely.
Now, I have to say this notion of space, I'm really excited to put this into action because, even for me, my anxiety has been heightened during this time. A lot of hyper arousal that we've been experiencing and hyper vigilance, as you said, with that activation of the sympathetic nervous system during this stressful time. And so finding ways to really have home be that sacred space, especially as we're all itching to, get out and be social, but to really create that sanctity within our home for ourselves. I'm, I have to say, I'm just really excited to as we, end this episode, just kind of rethink intentionally my space rather than just having it be the blank wall behind me. What do I need to energize myself and help myself be productive and take good care of myself and think of those core principles of trauma informed care even with inside my home as I'm working. So,
Yeah, that's true.
so Clover, before we let you go, I want to just ask, are there any other tips and tricks that we might want to consider as we're thinking about creating this intentional sacred space for ourselves or our other coworkers, regardless of their age?
Yeah, I think that we need to make sure that we are honoring, like I said, just really making sure that we're honoring um, the workspace of not just ourselves, but honoring the workspace of our coworkers, and also just bringing sacredness and sanctity in our space really involves doing a little bit of work ahead of time. So just making sure that you're preparing for that. And just making sure that you are anticipating things that might happen with your coworkers and preparing that calm for them as well as for yourself.
No, I love it. Recognizing that all of my coworkers may be facing some anxiety right now, not just me, but thinking about every coworker within my shared space. So, Clover, I can't say thank you enough. I've been really excited to just absorb your wisdom and thank you for all of the tips that you shared. Like I said, I am so excited to implement some of these, recognizing that, what I thought was going to be just, a few weeks working from home is now going to be a much longer time. So recognizing I need to take care of myself in a different way, and that physical environment is so crucial as we think about my well-being and our well-beings as a whole. So thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you. For those of you joining us either live or after the fact, your daily challenge today is going to be to think about how is it that you intentionally think about your space and making that connection that when our space is healthy, that so is our well-being. And so that our physical space is another way to take care of ourselves and take not just good care, but excellent care of ourselves. I just want to remind all of you tuning in that beginning Monday, we are starting our hashtag celebrating essential. So if you have someone who's doing crucial essential work to help keep our community alive and well, please make sure that you submit those nominations either to us in a message on Facebook or email us at info@awcommunities.org. We hope to hear from you as we celebrate those essential individuals in our community, recognizing that we can't celebrate them enough during this time. So again, a special thanks to our viewers for joining us. And Clover, thank you so very much. And we'll see all of our viewers back here tomorrow for another episode of Yoga Sundays. You all take care and think about your space.